What's going on, guys? We are back. We are at the end of the RLCS season, and I just wanted to go over just recap the season as a whole and how this all played out. Obviously, we'll have a little bit of recap for the final week, but for the most part, just go over what happened in the stand-ins and what is going to happen going forward for league play in terms of the regional championship. So we won't predict regional championships yet. I'll probably save that for a later video on Friday. We'll probably also have some MVP conversation with me and James on our pre-flip podcast on Wednesday. So I'll probably do that for the MVP stuff. Regional championships, me and him will probably predict a decent amount in there as well. But I'll also do my own standalone prediction video for you guys if you want to read it that way. So let's get into it. Let's talk about the season. I think one of the caveats was it was very hard. So we'll actually look at what I predicted here. So I'll throw this up real quick. We had Energy first, and this was back when it was still Afterthought. So Energy first, clearly wrong there. Space Station number 2, pretty decent pick, but I think a lot of people had them up there. G2 as number 3, pretty decent pick as well. Just had to move them both up a little bit. Pittsburgh Knights was one of my calls for like 4th, but I'm worried about them. They could drop out of playoffs. So we didn't get it right, obviously, with our predictions, but at least my inkling was there that it could happen when they drop out of regionals. I think the big deal after that, obviously, Cloud9 and Ghost, we got those pretty spot on. But the big deal was mostly Pittsburgh Knights falling down and Afterthought jumping up. We had Rogue and E United kind of in the general place again. It was mostly just the Sonics moving up and Energy moving down a bit with Pittsburgh Knights. The Sonics, obviously, they began the year so incredibly well on the back of Shock, and then Dapper started getting more involved. And then at the end of the season, they kind of collapsed just a little bit, but not terrible predictions because I don't think anyone had Afterthought. The pros had actually Afterthought number 10. I should have probably looked at the pro power rankings before coming on here, but that's fine. I can't remember all of them, but for the most part, they were pretty similar. We'll talk about Europe in a little bit as well, but there you go. So moving back over here, the big surprise of the season, obviously, the Sonics going 6-3. They began the season. Let's see. Remember, like after week 5, they were 4-1. Even I think after week 6, were they 5-1 at that point? Yeah, 5-1. So they just went on a tear at the start of the season. And then I think the other surprise, or maybe not surprise as much, because I think people were pretty high on G2 coming into the season, was G2 with the awesome start. But I think it was more of the interpretation of that, like G2 are gods. Like I saw that a lot, and obviously I think people just look at the record and like, this is amazing. Their offense was incredible, yada, yada. But they weren't tested at that point. I think that was a big storyline throughout this season of G2 getting tested. When would they get tested? When would that start? It started with Ghost came in, and it continued. And they struggled down the stretch. They obviously finally ended on a high note, beating Sonics in a perfect sweep this past week, as we see here. 2 and 5 goals, 0 goals across the board. The 3rd in RLCS history, the 4th ever in like major competition. So hats off to G2 to end on a really good note. And then they got some help to get one of these top 2 spots. Energy collapsing at the end, losing to Ghost, where Ghost was a weird team. Just looking across the board, like Ghost, I was like, I don't know where to put these guys. Like, they lose the Space Station. That's pretty predictable. They destroy E United. Like, I think a lot of people were a little bit down on E United, thinking it was a little bit of a fluke season. I think it is very similar to what the Sonics did this season. I think the Sonics overall slightly better than E United in terms of that, but because obviously, like, the Sonics did it over league play and stuff like that. Mostly E United won through regionals. But I could see the same kind of downturn from Sonics next season. We'll see how it all plays out. But it's very similar in terms of like the shot differentials and all of that going way in favor of the opposition over E United, who just plays defense all day. Sonics, very similar. They actually had a worse shot differential than E United throughout the season, dead last. So we'll see if that pans out next season. But for now, the Sonics hold serve with the clutch wins. But Ghost, just going back to them real quick. So they crush E United. Then they lose to Pittsburgh Knights in a rivalry matchup where could have went either way at that time. That's when Pittsburgh Knights were still looking okay, or at least we thought so. And then it was just kind of weird. They take down Flight. They lose to Sonics in a series they should not have lost in 5 games. So you're like, all right, maybe they can turn it around. They barely beat Rogue, which was a surprise. Like at that point, you would think they would beat them by a little bit more. Then they clap G2, right? They win 3-1. All right, we're good. We got the good Ghost. We don't have to worry. Then what happens is all they need to do is win literally one game versus Cloud9 to clinch a playoff berth. And they can't do that. They get swept. And then, of course, they take out Energy. So it's like, who knows? Who knows what you're going to get out of Ghost? They do make the playoffs. They fall into the 5th or 6th spot. It doesn't matter the order here. But I think the other big story, obviously, Cloud9. Cloud9 out of nowhere. If you go back, week 4, people were talking about relegation for Cloud9. This was the week that they took down Flight in... or not Flight, I'm sorry. They took them down in week 3. But still, people were talking about they could possibly be relegated at this point and be in 10th spot. Most people were like, they're probably not going to have to worry about it after they took down Flight, but it was still a possibility. So you go to week 4, they're 1-3. You go to week 5, they are 1-4 at this point. And you're like, all right, they're bottom 3. Maybe get 7th. Maybe like E United collapses a bit more and they can get 7th. That's about it. And then it begins. Week 6, Cloud9 moves up 2 spots to 2-4. Week 7, Cloud9 is now 4-4, and they're in 5th. And then week 8, they didn't move up anymore, but they did get another win. And if you look back on the season, very weird. Like, this 3-0 loss, so this was my problem with Cloud9. And, like, I always had faith that they were a decent team. But the problem was the teams that would have ranked above them about middle of the way through the season, they lost 2 in the first 2 weeks. That was the major issue. They lose to E United 3-0. Then they lose to Rogue in game 5 in that play where Torment just kind of side flips away from Kurnovi, who scored his 300th goal, I think it was, in that one. So it's like, I was like, I don't know what's going to happen at this point. Because, like, sure, they might get one upset win. And I feel like me and James talked about this like a lot on our podcast, where it's like, when we have a chance to pick upset wins, you generally pick Cloud9 because you feel like Cloud9 is going to get one eventually. And it happened. It just kept happening over and over and over again. So obviously they took down Flight. They lose to G2. Then they lose to Space Station, which is, fine. Like a G2 loss and Space Station loss, not the end of the world. Fireburner did say, like, that's when they were starting to turn it around. And then you go into the doubleheader, and they 3-0 Energy. So here's where it all starts. 3-0 Energy here. You're like, okay, that's crazy. Now let's see if they can do it again when they play Sonics. And then Sonics, they're down 0-2. They have to bring in Fireburner. And they freaking win that series as well. So they win 3 games in a row here. So that's 3 wins. Then 6 wins in a row. They take down Ghost in a sweep. Now 9 wins in a row at this point. They take down Pittsburgh Knights in a sweep. And honestly, they really won 2 games versus Pittsburgh Knights. But then after that, Pittsburgh Knights were gone. They were eliminated. So maybe that last win doesn't matter that much. But still, it's a great storyline. 9 wins in a row. 12-2 in their last 4 series, which includes playoff teams, Energy, the Sonics, Ghost, Pittsburgh Knights, who finished at least top 7, not in there as well, but still 3-2 versus playoff teams going into this. And like when you look at it on the opposite side for like G2, where G2 they start collapsing near the end, they have a worse record versus playoff teams than Cloud9, I believe. They have 1 loss here versus Ghost, so that's 1. They lost to Energy, so that's 2 losses. They lost to, I feel like there's another game I'm missing here for some reason, but maybe not. Oh no, I'm sorry, they do have 2 losses as well, I think. 3 losses, here you go, versus Space Station, and then they beat Sonic. So they're 2-3 versus playoff teams, and Cloud9 is 3-2. That's pretty wild. G2, obviously, we talked about Cloud9's another big story. Like Energy is kind of just like not doing all that well. But, when it comes to regionals, we'll see how it all plays out. And then Space Station, just super consistent the entire season. Just like a defensive rock. All 3 players playing really well at different times. You could point to one or another for player of the day. But honestly, all 3 played exceptional. And it's going to be very hard to give any of them an MVP because I think it was just all 3 of them played so well. I think very likely the MVP race comes between Shock and JNaps. And it really just determines how you're going to do it. I'm still like 50-50 on who I'm going to put as my number 1. I'm probably siding towards Shock. But I think by the time me and James do the podcast, we'll talk about that. But it's probably going to come down to those two. I think energy, the fault there for like MVP stuff is like Turbo started off really well for this team, and then he kind of fell apart towards the end. So they lose out. Cloud9, like a gimmick is the reason why they win games, and he's also the reason why they lose games sometimes. So there's not really one there. Maybe Squishy, but I don't think so. And then I think my third place vote would probably go to Atomic on Ghost just for his solid play throughout the season. Rlcs, I think it has a nod at that, but obviously a 3-6 season is very hard to give to an MVP unless there's really extreme circumstances like Bluey last season, in my opinion. And after that, obviously, there's really nothing else there. So I think on the bottom, like Pittsburgh Knights, obviously the collapse there wasn't great, but it was just a weird roster move to begin with. I'm surprised they went with it. Like, it's always surprising because you assume the pros should know 1,000 times more than you. And when, like, they get it wrong and you figured they would get it wrong, or, like, you thought that could happen, like, it just seems weird. But, it happens. Rogue, I thought First Killer would have a little bit more impact. Didn't really have it as much. I was expecting a bit more. Wonder at times looked bad. At times he looked pretty good. So say Crow. Like, some people were saying this is one of Crow's best seasons, and I'm like, he's got, like, the lowest goal total in the entirety of the RLCS in NA, and, like, I don't know. Like, I don't think Crow had that big of an impact on this team for a 3-6 team. I think he did fine, but he didn't do anything exceptional. United kind of fell flat. That's kind of what I expected. And then Flight, wasn't expecting a lot from them either, so they finished in 10th. So that's the recap for NA. We'll go into regional championship predictions in the next video on Friday. We'll go over to Europe now, so we don't make this too long. Like, I always feel bad because I always like do NA and then Europe, and then like I'm always like, oh, I gotta speed through Europe a little bit more, which I always feel a little bit bad on, but I usually don't anyway. I say I'm gonna, but yeah. So here, let's go over my EU predictions, which honestly were pretty on point. By the end, there was some twists and turns throughout the season, but they were pretty on point by the end of it. So when you look at it, my top two is correct, just in an opposite order. 3 and 4 are correct. 5 and 6 are correct in opposite order, but at least they're all on the same tiers for the semifinals. Then I got the promotion tournament exactly right, Endpoint and TSM. Problem is I flipped Monaco and Team Singularity. So that was like really the only surprise there. My thoughts going into the season, where I thought on paper we had a top 4 by a large margin with Vitality, Dig, Rec, and Mouse. And I wouldn't be surprised if they would have swapped anywhere in there. I wasn't that high on Rec. I wasn't that high on them at the World Championship. I predicted them to lose out before day 3. For the first time, a European 1 seed would not make a grand finals, basically. So I wasn't incredibly high in them because I worry about the Shawsat factor of, like, that's what they have to live on. And he wasn't amazing this season. Like, he was fine. He was good. He just wasn't Shawsat. So that kind of hurt them a little bit. But at the end of the day, they finished 6-3. They take down Dignitas in the final week, which was great for them. Then you got Mouse. No one expected the drama of Scrub not being on this team anymore, but they still pull out 2 wins anyway in the final week. They had a relatively easy schedule in the final week, which kind of helped them. But kudos to them to still pull it off. Kudos to Arju for playing really, really well. So that helped too. Veloce, I thought for a lot of the season was playing incredibly well. It was a little bit of the G2 factor of, like, their schedule was relatively weak. But at the end of the day, the only bad loss I felt like was Mouse, where they got swept. Then after that, it was like they played Dig to 5 games. They played Vitality to 5 games. I think that series is kind of like hard to actually consider a game 5 versus Vitality because there wasn't a lot to play for there for Vitality. But still, you played Dig to 5 games. Their offense was getting it going more. They're not just giving up a million shots like last season, so I like that about them. I would say when it comes to regionals, I'm probably going to have them coming out of the regional bracket, but we'll see if I change my mind by the time we do that. And then Barca is such a weird team because I thought at the start of the season they looked great. Flakes looked great. Diva looked great. Ronicky was shooting well. And then I felt like I was the only one seeing it. Like, I felt crazy because after like 2 weeks, they look really good. And then I think everyone was just like, yeah, Barca's great. They win in 5 versus Veloce. They sweep Endpoint, and then I think they won 1 more before. Oh, no. They played Vitality really close, and it was a good series. Sure, Vitality won, but it was a quality series. But the problem was Barcelona did not get a lot of shots that game. But the alarm bells began to ring for me when they played Reciprocity, and sure, they win the series, but they shoot 35 less shots. they're shooting like 4 shots per game in like multiple series in a row. And I'm getting worried at this point because I feel like they're losing control of the possession of the ball. And like, sure, that's a big win. Beating Rec. Fantastic. But you got to fix these issues. And then every week it was the same thing. Sure, again, they go to 5 games against Dig, but look at this. They score 4 goals in one game. Outside of that, no offense. So I'm like, okay, they do it in one game, but besides that, it still wasn't that pretty. They played Team Singularity. Again, not a lot of offense at all. And this is Team Singularity, a team you should beat. So, like, they go to 5 there. And then they go to 5 against Monaco. And we're getting to this point here where they go against 5 to TSM. They finally lose this series. This is where, like, they finally lose that clutch factor that they had, which is a big element, right? Like, you need to clutch out some wins. But they lose there, and then they lose again in 5 to Mouseport. So, games played. Barca had the most, I think, by far, probably on the season. They had, 41 games? So, 41 games. Yeah, that looks like it's the most across the board. Actually did get 42. So I guess because they were on save at the start. But looks like, yeah, that's about it. Yeah, so 42 from Dig was actually a little bit more. Where Dig, if you see all their series, 3-1, 3-2, 3-1, 3-2, 3-2, 3-2, 3-1, 3-2, 3-2. So they also a lot of close games. And that's one thing I want to bring up too as we get into the regional championship predictions, where sometimes the hype, I think, outshines what Dig is actually doing. Like, I think Dig, when they get the orchestrated offense going, it looks amazing. But early on in the season, they didn't have a lot of offense. They were actually, like, middle of the pack on offense. Like, them and Endpoint, when they played, had the exact same offensive numbers. It was 0.01 difference. But no one talks about Endpoint's offense. Everyone talks about Dignitas's offense. So there is, like, that factor of just, like, oh, because the goals look prettier on Dig, they matter more, which they don't. As long as the ball goes in the back of the net, who cares? Dig, I did like at the end of the season. Sure, they were actually a little bit rocky on their results, and I think they are reeling a bit. I do like that their offense is waking up a little bit more. Now they just got to clean up that defense again on the other side, which I think they're normally better at because they play that possession ball. But I wasn't really surprised by Vitality or Dig near the top. It was just, does Alpha work with K-Dop and Fairy Peak right away? I figured it would work eventually. K-Dop and Fairy Peak are solid players. And honestly, credit to Alpha, because this might be the best season of K-Dop and Fairy Peak's careers, or at least close to it. Like, obviously, K-Dop has had a ton of amazing seasons. But K-Dop and Fairy Peak played incredibly well. And a lot of that's due to Alpha, who wins the Clutch Playmaker Award. Like, he turned from the solo carry on TSM to passing the ball on Vitality, and did a fantastic job. He was even getting a ton of saves as well. So, there you go. Rec, again, relatively quiet, but they do pan out in the end. And I think it was just Veloce and Barca kind of mixing up that top 4 in the middle of the season was very interesting to see. And then they did finally fall back down to their places where they should be, I guess. I think Veloce has the right to consider themselves in the top 4 based on their play this season. And then we'll just see if Arju can hold up in the regional championships, which should be a lot of fun. On the bottom side, it was, I don't know, man. So it's funny because we sit here and, like, obviously as analysts, we get a lot of things wrong. Like, you have to predict a lot of things. And, like, the one thing I was shocked with, like, I don't really, like, bottom people, and, like, there'll be a surprise team, whatever. Like even on the other side with Sonics, where the pros rank them 10th. And, like, they do a lot better. Team Singularity was ranked 10th, but they finished 7th. Sure, whatever. That happens sometimes. But I was surprised that the pros ranked TSM as a top 6 team. That was very surprising to me, because after the roster move of, like, you're getting rid of your only offensive powerhouse at all on that team, at least the way they used to play with Alpha, and you're bringing in Magnus, who just had the worst offensive career or season, like, of his career. When he was playing with Complexity. It didn't seem like those issues would solve themselves. And guess what? It didn't. They scored barely over 1 goal per game. And, like, but the pros had them ranked pretty high. Maybe they scrim a lot better. Maybe they hold people very well defensively. I just always find it hard to be like, all right, like, if we're only putting up 1.2, 1.3 goals per game, that means our defense has to be literally perfect. Because once we give up 1 goal, it's astronomically harder for us to win that game. And I think that's the hard part with defensive teams. That's why I would much rather teams be offensive. Like, we talk about it, like me and the Chiefs say this all the time. In Rocket League, offense wins you games. And it's because you have the leeway of messing up on offense, and then you can still get back on defense. It doesn't really matter. But if you mess up on defense, it's a goal, and then you have to make up that goal, and then you dig yourself holes. TSM was just not good this season. Magnus at times, towards the end, a little bit more of a highlight reel player with a lot of solo plays. That's the problem too, though. It's all solo plays. It looks like TSM with Alpha at times, where Alpha is just doing all the solo plays. That's what it started turning into by the end of the season with Magnus. Remco early on in the season, I felt like was doing pretty well. But Metsonoris, incredibly quiet at 10 goals on the entirety of the season. Just like TSM, it's looking rough for them. They obviously get the win versus Barca to end their season, which is good. We'll see how they do in promotion tournament, but there's some quality teams in Europe for rival series, so it's going to be a tough one for them. Monaco, very disappointing season. I think a lot of people thought they would be ahead of, their two rival series counterpoints because they were better than them last season. Just didn't happen that way. Monaco kind of fell apart. Defense fell apart entirely. Extra is the only one on offense. And I think that's the most disappointing part is the defense for Monaco, where they were number one in rival series. And obviously that's going to take a hit. You're going to RLCS. It's much better offenses, but to be the worst defense, that has to hurt. That definitely has to hurt. And then Extra was the only one doing anything on the offensive side most of the time. I ignite a lot of bad defensive mistakes. Tigre, some poor play, and just most of the time just felt absent on the field. He also had 10 goals on the entire season. So not great looks there for Monaco. Obviously, an 0-9 season is not something to be proud of. So they're down to the rival series. And then Endpoint. It's one of those teams there. I saw glimpses. I saw glimpses of a chance for some success. And it was so close, but yet so far. Look at this. 2-7. So 5 games they lost more, or 5 matches lost more, and only -7 game differential. That's actually not that bad when you look at it. So they 3-0 someone, they get swept, and then 3-1 a game 5, 3-1, 3-1 a game 5, all these losses. Then they sweep someone else again, and then again they lose in 4. So 2 big wins or 2 big sweeps versus the 2 teams at the bottom of the leaderboard. I thought that at times they started to look a little bit better. But I think Team Singularity at the end of the season looked better than they looked at the beginning of the season. I thought, obviously they take down Vitality early, right? And that's a big shock. But I was not sold on them until I see this again. And I was very worried because, when they played Rec back in week 1, it was just defensive mistake after defensive mistake. I'm trying to find the schedule here. Sorry, I have to go the other way. That cost them that series. Then they beat Vitality. And people are like, oh, are they here? And I'm like, all right, hold the phone. They've played Dig and Mouse, but again, it wasn't so much Dig and Mouse beating them. It was them making a lot of mistakes again, double commits and all of that. So that's where I was like, they're back where they should be, right? Sure, they played what we considered the top 4, and it wound up being the top 4 in their first 4 games and went 1-3. So you think, all right, maybe they have a chance, but they couldn't make up that difference at that point. One of the series that I thought was a glaring problem was even when they beat TSM. This series was so long. It was 30 minutes of gameplay, and they scored 6 goals. So they averaged 1 goal per 5 minutes. And it was it's not normally going to cut it. They obviously, at the end of the season, I did feel like they started to change, and they started to play better. They controlled the series versus Endpoint, and outside of Virtuoso playing really well, in that series, this could have been a blowout. They did then beat them again in the Euro Invitational. They beat Vitality there as well, but there was a lot of lag issues, and Alpha got subbed out. So that result is moot. It doesn't really matter. But then they smack around Monaco. It looked like that they were figuring it out. It's just they figured it out too late. They needed one more win somewhere versus one of these teams. Actually, probably 2. I know, just 1. If they would have beat Veloce or Barca, they're in. That's all they needed. It was just a little bit too late at that point because they just lost to them recently. They lost to Veloce there. And then this series right here where Barca barely beats Team Singularity is the difference of why Barca's in playoffs versus Team Singularity. And that's all it is this 1-0 game on Champions Field. That's it. It's the only difference. And that's why every single game matters. That's why game 5s matter so much. But Team Singularity, I think they can hold their heads high. We'll see what they do with the roster because I feel like a lot of teams in Europe, they love to make roster moves. So we'll see what happens. But I mean, if they don't make moves, I think that they have a shot to continually get better. So that should be pretty interesting there. That's about it. That's the recap of RLCS Season 9. Obviously, it was a weird season. We all know this. There's only regionals to play for. It sucks. We all know this. We're going to make the best of what we have. And it's the least of our worries right now, right? So everyone stay safe. Hopefully everyone's healthy and happy. And just enjoy the time at home. Enjoy the time with family. Enjoy just being able to maybe relax or try and find a way to relax. And maybe just watch some more Rocket League esports to keep your head distracted. But that's it for me on this video for the recap of Season 9. I think I called it Season 8 before. It's tough, man. It's getting to the point where I'm forgetting what season number is which. And I've said that many times on the desk where I'm like, yeah, back then in Season 5 when those guys did that, and I'm like, crap, right after the second, I'm like, I think it was Season 6. But it happens, man. We're getting up there in numbers, but we'll have fun at the regional championships. Look out for the predictions. Me and James will probably do it in our podcast as well as MVP Talk on Wednesday. We're live Tuesday at 9 p.m. Eastern on Prediction Esports on their Twitch, PREED, so on and so forth. So check that out. And then Friday I'll have probably my own video for my regional championship predictions, because a lot of times people just click on the ones that only say predictions and they don't want to hear a whole podcast. So I'll probably do one too then. But that's going to do it for me. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for tuning in for an incredibly difficult season, production-wise and everything and so forth. But we'll see you in the regional championships this weekend. Bye.